The sauna of my childhood was black. Not painted black, blackened. Years and years of smoke had soaked into the timber until the walls themselves seemed to be made of soot. If you leaned against them, they could leave dark marks on your skin, and the smoke would sting your eyes. Don't rub them. No matter how badly your eyes watered, rubbing them would only make it worse. Our sauna stood beside the lake Kianta in Kaino, where I spent a lot of my childhood. It was an old sauna, a smoke sauna. And if you've never encountered one before, the name is quite literal. A traditional smoke sauna has no chimney. While it's being heated, wood burns beneath the great mass of stones, and the smoke from the fire fills the sauna itself. It rolls around the stones, climbs the walls, and darkens the timber. This doesn't mean that everyone sits inside happily breathing smoke for several hours. You heat the sauna first, slowly, patiently. The stones absorb an enormous amount of heat. Eventually, the fire is allowed to die, the sauna is aired, and the thick smoke escapes. Then you go inside. What remains is the heat and the smell. Smoke, wood, birch, hot stone, lake water. Our walls had been smoked so many times that touching them could stain your skin. Often we cooked there too. Sausages, fresh fish on the hot stones of the kiwas. But before any of that, you had to get inside. And there was another rule about that. There were a few steps leading up to our sauna. My grandfather told me always to knock on the highest step before entering, because underneath those steps there was a snake, or more precisely, the head of one. My grandfather told me that he had once caught a viper near the sauna. He had severed its head, blessed it as the guardian of the sauna, and buried the head underneath the steps. The snake was our saunahaltia now, a guardian. It would look after the Löyly. It would watch over the sauna and the other Väki that lived there. And because this was their place too, you did not simply throw open the door and march inside. You knocked. You announced yourself. You waited, if only for a moment, and then you entered. As a child, none of this seemed particularly strange to me. There was a snake underneath the sauna. Of course there was. Perhaps that tells you something about Finnish sauna culture better than any history book could. Because the Finnish sauna has never been merely a very hot room where naked people sit and sweat, although, admittedly, it is also that. Sauna is extraordinarily ordinary in Finland. We have them in cottages and houses and apartment buildings, hotels, swimming pools, workplaces. There are public saunas and private saunas, electric saunas and wood-burning saunas, smoke saunas and beautifully designed modern ones. There are enormous saunas. There are tiny saunas where 3 Finnish people will look at the 4th and insist that there definitely is still room. Finns playfully argue about how hot sauna should be. We argue about how much water should be thrown onto the stones. We argue about whether the bundle of birch branches is called vihta or vasta. And perhaps most importantly, we compliment the one whose sauna has a good löyly. But underneath these very ordinary rituals is something extraordinarily old. Because sauna was once far more than the place where you just washed yourself. People were born there. The sick were treated there. Brides were prepared there. Bodies and spirits were cleansed there. Magic was performed there. And the dead were prepared there before burial. Sometimes the sauna was heated for people who were no longer alive at all. The same little wooden room could witness someone's first moments in this world, and someone's last moments within their community. The sauna stood at both doors, the one through which we arrive and the one through which we leave. And very often standing beside those doors were women. But our sauna isn't hot yet. A smoke sauna takes patience. So first we need wood. Someone has to carry it. Someone has to fetch the water. Someone has to prepare the room. Someone has to tend the fire. And historically, very often, that someone was a woman. This is something easily lost when we tell history. We remember battles, kings, treaties, religious conversions, great men doing great things in very large buildings. We don't always remember who carried the water, who heated it, who washed the children, who knew which plants to gather when somebody was ill, who knew how hot the room needed to be, who knew which words were supposed to be spoken, who washed blood from a woman's body after birth, who washed a body after death. Much of human history was maintained by people doing things that looked ordinary. And the sauna was full of ordinary things: fire, water, stone, wood, leaves, skin, blood, smoke, breath. None of them particularly remarkable by themselves. Put them together, however, and something happens. While the stones are heating, you should probably learn the rules. Every sacred place seems eventually to acquire rules. Churches have them, temples have them, forests have them too, although humans have become rather good at forgetting those. And sauna had them too. They weren't written on a laminated sign beside the door. You learned them because somebody older than you knew them. You behaved yourself. You respected the fire. You respected the people bathing beside you. And you respected whatever else might be bathing there when you were not. In many traditions, unnecessary noise and swearing were inappropriate. You didn't insult the sauna. You didn't behave badly there. and you didn't necessarily stay too late, because there was a time for humans to bathe, and then there was a time for somebody else. The sauna haltia was not simply decorative folklore. Stories tell of sauna guardians protecting buildings, warning households of danger, and punishing those who ignore the rules. And they didn't necessarily resemble the gnome-like little red-capped saunatonttu you might find today sitting on a Finnish souvenir shop's shelf. Sometimes the guardian appeared as an old man, sometimes an old woman, sometimes a young woman dressed in white, sometimes something considerably stranger. One recorded story describes a grey hairy creature with a single shining eye in the middle of its forehead, which, admittedly, would make remembering the sauna rules considerably easier. Another story tells of a man entering the sauna late at night. Inside sat a woman dressed in white. She was combing her long hair. He tried to speak to her. She disappeared. The explanation was simple. Se oli halti. It was the guardian, he said. And notice when he found her. At night. Perhaps he stayed too long. His turn was over. Now the sauna belonged to somebody else. I love this idea. Not necessarily because I believe that at midnight a supernatural old woman clocks in for her shift at every Finnish sauna. Although I'm also not suggesting that you test it. I love it because it comes from a world view in which human beings are not automatically entitled to every place at every hour. Eventually you leave. Eventually the forest belongs to the forest. The lake belongs to the lake. And the sauna belongs to whatever waits after you. There was a time for us, and there was time for them. Now we need something else. Branches, fresh ones ideally. Birch. Gather enough of them. Arrange the leafy ends. Bind the stems into a handle. And suddenly we encounter one of the great divisions of Finnish civilization. Is this a vihta, or is it a vasta? Depending on where you grew up, there may be only one sensible answer. Usually people explain this very neatly. Eastern Finland says vasta. Western Finland says vihta. The actual dialect geography is rather messier than that, particularly in parts of northern and western Finland. So call it whichever word makes your grandmother least likely to correct you. The branches are warmed, the leaves soften, and slowly the smell of birch begins to fill the room. Then you hit yourself with them, which is one of those moments when explaining Finnish sauna culture to somebody unfamiliar with it becomes slightly difficult. No, we're not fighting. No, it isn't punishment. And no, despite the nakedness and spanking, this isn't going where you think it is. Gentle strokes, shoulders, back, legs, warm leaves against hot skin, and suddenly the entire sauna smells like midsummer. Green leaves, rain, wood, lake water. Summer nights that never quite become dark. But the vihta or vasta could be more than a bathing tool. It could become an oracle. One old custom involved throwing the used sauna whisk onto the roof. Then you looked at how it landed. The direction of the handle might tell an unmarried person something about marriage. In other circumstances, particularly ominous directions could foretell death. The same wet bundle of birch that had just been hitting your backside was suddenly telling your future. Human beings have always searched for the unknown in whatever happened to be nearby. Stars, birds, bones, cards, coffee grounds, and apparently wet birch branches thrown onto a sauna roof. Personally, I approve. The stones are getting hotter now, and before we throw water onto them, we need another Finnish word. Löyly. Today, löyly usually means the steam and wave of heat created when water strikes the hot stones. But the word carries much older meanings. Breath, spirit, life force. The invisible thing that distinguishes a living body from a dead one. When water hits the stone, something invisible suddenly becomes tangible. You cannot hold löyly. You cannot keep it. It arrives. It surrounds you. It touches your skin, and then it disappears. Like breath, like life. But not yet. The stones need a little longer. And while we wait, another woman is approaching the sauna. She's getting married. Before the dress, before the feast, before the dancing and drinking, there may be sauna. Morsiussauna. The bridal sauna. There was never one universal Finnish bridal sauna ceremony. Traditions changed from region to region and across time, and many customs practiced today combine older material with modern reconstructions. Folklore is rarely tidy, but beneath many bridal sauna traditions is the same idea. The bride is crossing a threshold. She enters as one person, and she leaves as another. Historically, marriage could mean leaving your childhood household and entering another family, farm, or community. Your place in the social world changed, and before that happened, other women gathered around you. Mothers, relatives, friends, attendants. Women who had crossed the threshold before. They washed the bride, whisked her with the vihta or vasta. They sang, gave advice, teased her, prepared her. The old life could symbolically be washed away, and something new called into being. There were traditions concerned with fertility, beauty, luck, desire, and lempi. Lempi is another wonderfully slippery Finnish word. love, affection, desirability, attraction. A kind of magnetism that draws another person towards you. In folk magic, lempi could be raised, strengthened, restored. The bride wasn't merely getting clean, she was being transformed. And not everything about this transformation was solemn. I think we sometimes make historical women's traditions much too ethereal. We imagine everybody in white linen whispering ancient incantations beneath the moon. Women also laughed. They told rude jokes. They embarrassed their friends. They gave terrible advice. Some bridal sauna traditions could deliberately make the bride uncomfortable. Juniper branches might be placed beneath her, prickly ones, because married life would not always be dancing on roses. Nettles also appear in some traditions, because apparently nothing prepares a woman for matrimony quite like being attacked with local vegetation. Modern continuations of bridal sauna traditions can include whisking the bride while calling out the names of former lovers. Out with Matti. Out with Bertti. There goes Esko. It is funny, but underneath the laughter is something rather tender. That life happened. Those people happened. That person you were happened. Now we wash. Now we breathe. Now we begin again. And perhaps that is why sauna appears so often around transitions. Dirty becomes clean, cold becomes warm, sick becomes healed, girl becomes bride, pregnant woman becomes mother, living body becomes dead body, and perhaps the dead become ancestors. Again and again, people entered this little wooden room when they were between things. No wonder there were spirits here. There is another image I keep returning to. The womb. I don't want to claim that every Finnish person who entered a sauna centuries ago consciously thought, I am entering a womb. We simply don't know that. But the resemblance is difficult to ignore. You leave your clothes outside. You cross a threshold. You enter somewhere small, dark, warm, wet. The outside world disappears. There is water. There are naked bodies. And eventually the room fills with breath. Löyly. Then the door opens. Cold air touches your skin. You emerge, perhaps into snow, perhaps into a lake. And something about you is different. Sometimes only that you're clean. Sometimes that you're married. Sometimes that you're recovering. And once, quite literally, that you have just been born. Because women actually gave birth here. A child could enter the world from one warm, dark, watery place inside another. Perhaps the sauna did not need to symbolize the womb. For the child born there, it surrounded the womb. And while preparing this episode, I had the enormous pleasure of speaking with Finnish scholar, author, artist, and ecofeminist Kaarina Kailo, whose work on sauna culture, women, folklore, and older spiritual traditions has been enormously inspiring to me. During our conversation, Kaarina told me about an image I haven't been able to get out of my head. In some of the sweat traditions she has studied, people enter the sweating space by literally crawling between a woman's legs. The symbolism could hardly be more physical. You don't simply enter a building. You pass through the body of a woman, into darkness, into heat, into moisture, and eventually you emerge again. Rebirth doesn't have to be metaphorical when the ritual makes the metaphor into something your body actually performs. And this is a good moment to leave Finland for a little while, because sauna is profoundly Finnish. But sweating inside a heated enclosed space is not uniquely Finnish at all. Human beings have been building places for ritual sweating across enormous distances and very different cultures. Ireland has its historic stone sweat houses. Across northern and eastern Europe, there have been numerous bathing and sweating traditions. Many indigenous peoples of North America have their own distinct and still living sweat lodge traditions. There are examples elsewhere in Europe and across the world. These traditions are not all the same. They don't belong to one universal culture. And indigenous sweat ceremonies in particular have their own meanings, protocols, and spiritual traditions that should not simply be renamed sauna. But the recurrence itself fascinates me. Again and again, humans discovered something about combining the same basic things: fire, stone, water, darkness, sweat, and bodies, and very often we did more there than wash. We healed, we prayed, we prepared ourselves for change, we met ancestors and spirits, we marked traditions. Perhaps Finland's remarkable contribution isn't that Finns alone discovered some secret hidden inside steam. Perhaps it is that this particular northern expression of an ancient human idea remained extraordinarily stubborn. Christianization came, industrialization came, cities came, electricity came, showers and indoor plumbing and modern medicine came, and still we kept the little hot room. We put electric heaters in apartment blocks. We built saunas beside swimming pools. We carried sauna into modern life. We kept throwing water onto stones. The 5.6 million people of Finland decided that we still required 3.3 million saunas for our modern needs. Now, imagine another sauna, not ours, maybe an even older one, perhaps somewhere in Karelia, perhaps somewhere in Kailo. Outside there's winter, inside there's heat. A woman is giving birth. There is no hospital, no electric light, no clean white sheets, but there is hot water, there are wooden walls, and there is another woman beside her who has done this before, perhaps many times. Sauna made practical sense for childbirth. It was warm, private, water could be heated, the room could be prepared away from the bustle of the household. But practicality and sacredness have a habit of becoming tangled together. Birth was dangerous for the mother, for the child. And whenever humans stand close to something powerful that we cannot completely control, rituals tend to appear. Words, protections, objects, rules. Things done because your mother did them, and her mother did them, until eventually nobody quite remembers who began. The sauna became somewhere women cared for bodies at their most vulnerable, and therefore somewhere women accumulated knowledge. Not necessarily knowledge kept in books, knowledge kept in hands, in repetition, in songs, in knowing when something was wrong, in knowing when to wait, in knowing which plants to gather, in knowing how hot the water should be, in knowing what to whisper. Sometimes their voices still reach us. There are female names preserved in old sauna incantations. Auteretar, Sanervatar, Gulun akka. Female beings associated with mist, Löyly, healing, and the sauna itself appear within Finnish and Karelian traditions. It would make a wonderfully dramatic podcast if I simply announced that the ancient Finnish women worshipped a great sauna goddess and that sauna attendants were her priestesses. History refuses to be that convenient. What we have are fragments. Female names inside charms, women heating saunas, women washing bodies, women assisting childbirth, women treating illness, women preparing brides, women preparing the dead. Female sauna guardians appearing in collected stories, fragments. And perhaps fragments are enough. Because in 1881, in Puolanka in Kailo, somebody still knew the words. A sauna healing charm was recorded there, and in it someone calls, Sanervatar saunapiika, Sanervatar, maiden of the sauna. She is called upon in connection with the Löyly. The heat is directed, guided, told where it may go and where it must not. Not into the painful places, not into the wounds. Heat is no longer simply temperature. It has intention. It can be spoken to. It can be asked to heal. I don't know the names of all the women who knew words like these. We probably never will. but somebody knew them. Somebody remembered them. Somebody repeated them. Eventually somebody wrote them down. And now we are listening again to the sound of Löyly. The sauna could function as something resembling a household treatment room. People were washed there, massaged, cupped. The warmth could soothe aching bodies. Plants accompanied treatments. Water was available, and the room offered privacy. Long before modern healthcare reached every remote Finnish community, practical treatment, folk medicine, and magic did not necessarily exist in separate categories. A plant could have a practical medicinal use and also possess Väki. Massage could help an aching muscle and be accompanied by words. A healer could understand a body practically while simultaneously understanding illness through an entirely different cosmology. We like categories: medicine here, magic there, religion somewhere else. Our ancestors were under no obligation to organize the universe for our convenience. And sauna didn't only mark the human life cycle. It marked the year. Christmas sauna remains familiar even to the Finns who would never describe what they're doing as an ancient spiritual practice. Something about joulusauna still feels different. You go earlier, you take your time. Perhaps there are candles. Perhaps everybody becomes slightly quieter without discussing why. Older traditions could be more explicitly magical. Behavior in the Christmas sauna could influence the coming year. Silence could have protective power. Beer might be thrown onto the stones in hope of a good barley crop. And vihta or vasta might end up on the roof, telling you about marriage or death. Christian Christmas arrived, but all the patterns didn't necessarily disappear. They settled underneath it, like smoke into wood. And before Christmas became Finland's great winter festival, there was Kekli. The end of the agricultural year, the harvest completed, one cycle closing before another began. And once again the sauna became a threshold. Because the sauna could be prepared not only for the living, it could be prepared for the dead. Imagine it: wood carried, fire lit, water ready, stones hot, everything exactly as it should be. And then you leave. The sauna looks empty. But perhaps the people who once lived here are coming home. Grandparents, great-grandparents, people who built this place, people who worked the land, people whose hands touched these same objects, people whose names perhaps nobody living remembers anymore. They get their turn. There was time for us, and there was time for them. death did not necessarily remove you completely from the household. The ancestors still belonged. They could still be offered hospitality, and naturally they still needed sauna. Even death does not get you out of proper Finnish bathing etiquette. Perhaps now we should talk about bodies, because the sauna has seen them, real ones. Children beside grandparents, young bodies, old bodies, pregnant bodies, menstruating bodies, bodies that have given birth, fat bodies, thin bodies, disabled bodies, scarred bodies, sick bodies, bodies that have survived decades of simply being alive. Finnish sauna nakedness is not automatically sexual nakedness. The body becomes a body. And perhaps this matters particularly when thinking about women's relationship with sauna. The sauna has seen women's bodies without demanding that they be decorative. It has seen them bleeding, laboring, feeding children, sweating, healing, aging, dying. It has seen bodies doing what bodies do. Perhaps this is another kind of bare being, not performing, not presenting, simply existing inside a body. While researching this episode, I wanted to ask Kaarina Kailo one question. Kaarina is a Finnish scholar, author, artist, and activist whose work has explored women's culture, folklore, sauna traditions, ecofeminism, spirituality, and our relationship with the more than human world. Rather than asking her to explain sauna history to me, I wanted to know what she thought we had lost. So I asked, what one forgotten thing about our relationship with sauna would you restore to our collective memory? This is her answer. In fact, I traced the shifts and changes that have taken place within the global culture of sweats, from sweat lodges and sweat houses to the sauna in my books. It is clear that a more matristic, even matriarchal culture of ritual bathing presided over by wise women has been replaced by patriarchal lifeways. Women focused on life, death and rebirth, healing and initiation rituals, with the personified sauna as the Great Mother. With patriarchy, male deities entered the sweats and in many cultures all but erased the female guardian spirits and feminine symbolism. Where the female spirits focused on protection and positive transitions in the life cycles, patriarchy introduced male-only spirits in Finland who brought notions of punishment and control. Yet traces of the gift economy, interdependence with non-human nature involving mutuality, gratitude, give back, are still present in many cultures. As conclusion, the pre-patriarchal culture was more ecologically and socially sustainable, peaceful, balance-oriented, and caring, and emphasized equality. It was grounded in ancestor worship, shamanism, animism, and a culture of holistic healing preventive healthcare. Now the sauna has been turned in part to benefit the market economy and for profit thinking. The objectification and commodification of the sauna in Europe has resulted in the eco-spiritual roots of the sweats being weakened. The high tech has added to detaching bathers from ritual participation. I think it is urgent from the point of view of a balanced, eco-socially sustainable future that we recover the feminine and culturally maternal matristic dimensions, values, and practices of the ancient sweat houses. We need to relearn to be grateful for the gifts of nature and all that makes life sustainable. Profit thinking and commercial interests risk turning the sauna into just another commodity without spirit and holistic healing potential. In the context of rising fascism, hate speech, and inequalities, we need institutions of peace, equality, humility, bare being, and radical embodied healing away from dissociated, non-embodied, digitalized humanity. These are Kaarina Kailo's interpretations developed through her research into sauna and global sweat traditions. And when she sent me her answer, there were 3 words I kept returning to: mutuality, gratitude, give back. And strangely enough, they brought me straight back to my grandfather's sauna, to the steps, to the snake. Because my grandfather never sat me down and taught me the theory of ecological reciprocity. He never explained the gift economy to me. He simply told me, there is a snake underneath your feet. This is its place too, so before you enter, knock. Perhaps very large ideas can survive inside very small gestures. Eventually every sauna ends, and eventually every life does too. There was a time when a dead person's body could be brought into sauna for its final washing. The same room that received newborn babies received people whose breathing had stopped. And there was water, and there were hands. And again, often, women's hands. The body was washed, prepared, made ready. I don't find this particularly morbid. There is a tenderness in washing someone. We wash babies because they cannot wash themselves. We wash sick people when they need us. And once, more commonly than today, families and communities washed their dead. The body that had carried somebody through their entire lifetime was cared for one final time. Think about the symmetry. At the beginning of your life, someone washes you. At the end of your life, someone washes you. And for a little while in between, you wash yourself. The body leaves. The sauna remains, waiting for another fire, another winter, another birth. The stones are ready. Finally, take the ladle, not too much. You can always add more. Listen. there, Löyly. The heat rises, and for a moment the room disappears. Steam moves across the black walls, across shoulders, faces, breasts, bellies, the bride, the newborn, the healer, the dead. The woman in white combing her hair after midnight, Sanervatar. The ancestors waiting for their kekri sauna. My grandfather, the snake underneath the step. Me, you, all of us sitting in the same dark room. Not at the same time, of course, although in folklore, time occasionally behaves strangely too. There are rooms that remember us, not literally, perhaps, or perhaps literally, depending on the kind of world you believe you inhabit. Places accumulate human behavior. A groove appears in wooden steps because thousands of feet have crossed it. Smoke settles into timber, and rituals settle into people. Perhaps this is why traditions survive even after belief disappears. You might not believe there is a haltia in the sauna, but you still behave differently there. You sit, you stop rushing, you throw water onto the stones, you watch the steam rise. Perhaps you leave the sauna clean for whoever comes after you. Perhaps somebody still tells you not to swear. Perhaps you don't know why Christmas sauna feels different from an ordinary Saturday sauna. Perhaps your grandfather tells you there is a snake's head underneath the steps, and perhaps you still knock. Eventually we have to leave. Outside the lake is waiting. Perhaps it's summer. There is enough light in the sky that night never quite arrives. The surface of the water is dark and still. Behind you stands the little black building. Steam rises from your skin. Somewhere beneath the steps lies the head of a viper. At least that's what my grandfather told me, and I believe him. Not necessarily because I believe a severed snake has spent all these years managing the supernatural population of my grandfather's sauna, but because there are different ways for something to be true. There really was a sauna. There really was a lake. There really was smoke that made my eyes sting. There really were sausages and fresh fish on the kiwas. There really was my grandfather telling me, knock. So I knocked. And somewhere between the fire and the water, between women giving birth and women washing the dead, between brides sitting on juniper and ancestors waiting for their turn, between Sanervatar and the electric sauna in the modern apartment building, between ancient sweat houses around the world and the little black room beside the Gianta lake, between the spirits we say we no longer believe in and the rituals we continue performing anyway. Something has remained. Perhaps some of it is memory. Perhaps some of it is simply gratitude. Perhaps it doesn't need a name. Before we leave, we put things back where they belong, We make sure the fire is safe. We carry what needs carrying. We leave the sauna ready for whoever comes next. One last look at the black walls. One last breath of smoke. And then we step across the threshold. But don't forget, there is a snake beneath your feet. This is its place too. So before you go, perhaps you should knock, just in case. Before I leave you, I wish to share the whole healing charm recorded in 1881, where we ask Sanervatar to strengthen the Löyly and help us guide it. Sanervatar, saunapiika, oletko löylyssä asuja? Piilten piika huoneessa. Luo löyly lähetä lämmin, lämmin kiukaan kivihin, löyly saunan sammaliin. 3 on tietä männäksesi, 1 ovesta, toinen ikkunasta, 3 saunan salvaimesta. Tuulille taivahaisille, ahaville ilmasille, tuulen tuuviteltavaksi, viluilman vietäväksi, ahavan ajettaviksi. Tule löylyhyn Jumala, Isä ilman, lämpömähän. Puun löyly, kivosen lämmin, henki vanhan Väinämöisen, hiki nuoren joukahaisen, monista hyvistä tehly. Usiasti siunajeltu, ellös kipeihin menkö, ellös haavoihin hajotko. Manaten menet manalle, pahoin tulet tuonelahan. Thank you for listening to Rootsong Studio podcast. Goodbye for now.